Okay, great. So I'm going to do my best here. I don't know if this is going to be too long or not, so I'm going to go really fast in places. But I want more than anything to be this an opportunity to just show people some cool ideas I've been stewing on that Flyte has allowed me to do. If this is getting you thinking about things differently, great. Please ask questions. I'm going to be talking a lot about other tools and not just Flyte. So this isn't like a Flyte talk. So I'm aware the room is a Flyte room. So, I apologize ahead of time, but I promise it's all towards a goal of just, trying to highlight a bigger picture way that like these imperative workflows can be used. So my first joke of the day is, no code Flyte. I've called the presentation no code Flyte because there's no Flyte code in the presentation. So, yeah, no, you'll see. Okay, a little bit about me. Not the DS. So I'm based in New York, been here for a while now. I'm your standard New Yorker whenever you talk to any of us. We love the city, we love food, we love parks, people walking, running, biking, you name it, I'm there doing the thing. I'm also a dad, so had a kid recently. So I like to say I used to have hobbies, but now I have an infant daughter. So hopefully I'll have hobbies again one day. And so when I'm not complaining about not having hobbies anymore, I do like to garden a lot. That's my thing if I can do it. I spend so much time at the computer looking at numbers and spreadsheets and moving numbers around from place A to place B. Being able to get outside and work with my hands and experiment and tootle around with plants is an absolute blast. So that's just a picture of a rooftop garden I was helping to maintain a couple of years ago. So very proud of my dahlias there. Yeah, I love gardening also because it's great for pipeline metaphors, but I don't think I have any prepared today for you all. But if you see me again, you'll probably hear a gardening metaphor. Sorry, did I mention I'm Canadian? So I'll get that out of the way before I say about, sorry, or any of the other trigger words. So yes, I live in New York, but I am Canadian and I still have some of those traits that remain. And just to flag, this is our new New York logo, which I'm not a huge fan of. I love the retro look of the old one, but I digress. Okay, so about me as the data scientist, let's talk shop a little bit more. I've been in this sort of big data analytics space, the intersection of the two, for about 10 years now. I got my start as a PhD candidate. I was working on multi-site neural eye movement and behavioral data. So we're, registering data from the brain at high fidelity, multi-site, so terabytes and terabytes of streaming data coming in, eye movement data, behavioral experiment data. This is all scientific medical equipment, nothing designed to ever talk to each other. So, half a dozen different logs, all designed completely different. Nothing wants to be coordinated. And so the big job there was getting it all aligned, analyzed, summarized, and set up in a way that we can actually, write a paper and do some statistical analysis on, dozens and dozens of terabytes of memory data. And so here, I just want to highlight some sort of chapters of my life as I go through this. And for me, it was really foundational where I started in this world of kind of organizing data as structs for nothing better to do it in. So structs are kind of this MATLAB construct, and I think it exists in Java as well. I'm not a Java guy. I think a Python dictionary is a pretty close, similar, but yeah, anyways, maybe a pseudo class or whatever, but really in the structs zone, and slowly starting to get into the sense that no, if you organize data as tables and start to leverage SQL transformations, you can move really quick across a lot of data sets and start to join stuff up in a way, and organize, even more importantly, stuff up in a way that enhances basically everything. So more reproducibility, less code, easier to read, easier to understand what you did before, less custom stuff. It may not sound like a lot, but that was a major jump for me as a data practitioner. So after my PhD, I did what all PhDs do now and became a data scientist. And I was very driven to move into the entertainment and streaming space. The big reason there is I love the lab, I love data, I love getting behavioral, psychology is a big part of my background. But in streaming and entertainment, you get to do that at a scale of millions, if not hundreds of millions, if not many hundreds of millions. And so suddenly, if you get into the right industry in data science, you've got almost on the laboratory is now the real world, and you have access to all this stuff at a scale that never existed before. So that was a very natural step to me to say, okay, cool, I want to do all the things I was doing before, but now with 100 million people, not 10 or 5 or 1. So, for a couple of years, I was working on a platform for live tracking emotions across all of our user engagement. This was when I was at Viacom. So we own a ton of different assets across a lot of different platforms, and we were able to pull in comments, engagements, all sorts of social data on that, and then process it all and build a live model. And so for me there, really the big growth was, starting to think about architecture in terms of tasks and pipelines, and not just this sort of PhD notebook kind of data science stuff, but actually being disciplined in a software architecture, methodology, and really, data processing becomes a pipeline, and really well defining your tasks as part of that pipeline. And then also, shipping your tasks to the cloud. So do all your heavy lifting not on your laptop. Again, this all sounds like super simple stuff, but it was a major step for me, again, as I was evolving as a data practitioner. And then finally, now I'm at Spotify. I lead an insights and an analytics engineering team. And a big part of that is we manage and own hundreds of data processing workflows that directly serve analytics teams and feed into dozens of other teams as well. And, the next step for me in my learning of data practicing is scale. Like, how do you scale this stuff? You can build all the pipelines you want, but scaling is a totally different problem. And to me, it becomes, tasks really, you don't just have to have a sense of a pipeline. You have to have explicitly defined pipelines. Your tasks live in the relationships, in proper DAGs, and then almost as importantly, you have tooling to manage all of that too. So you're not doing all of this. I grew up in my mid-career doing pipelines by hand, and now I automate as much as the pipeline building and management as possible with tooling. So hopefully that's a bit of a background about who I am and kind of my experience levels. You won't see computer science engineering anywhere here. I am a data science and a lover of tech, but I'm not a comp sci engineer. So please do forgive me if some of the language is not quite landing exactly in a place you may be familiar to hearing it. So, one last thing before I get into it. The thoughts and opinions are my own. I do not reflect those of my employer. This is a reflection of my personal IC work. The code is my own. There's no Spotify code, examples, docs, nothing from Spotify here. And it's important for me to recognize that Spotify is a contributor to the Flyte project. This talk is not about that. This work and these concepts is independent of that effort. So just want to acknowledge all of that, get that out of the way. Okay, so let's talk about using Flyte as a backend workflow orchestrator for a different tool that becomes our user front end, which would be kind of our workflow relationship builder, as I like to call it. So we'll have a backend front end style paradigm. Flyte, let me just say, this is a Flyte room, and I want to acknowledge it. Flyte makes creating and managing tasks very easy. I can't build a better tool than what Flyte does in Python for this. And so this talk is not meant to be like, we need to replace the way Flyte does it. It's meant to be, hey, look, you can also do it this way. That's kind of cool. Despite Flyte's strengths in being able to, define and do your workflows and tasks and run your code and all of that in the Flyte box, users may have a preferred paradigm for managing their tasks and workflows and the relationships there. And so imperative workflows give us a way to support that. And that's really like one of the main takeaways I want to give today. And so this talk is an example of using dbt to build and manage the DAG, ship it to Flyte, and use Flyte as our workflow orchestrator. So I want to kind of use the best things of my two favorite current tools, but I'll get into that. So thanks to imperative workflows, we can automate most of this process. And to the user, they deal with their tool of choice. And the rest, workflow orchestration and running in Flyte is happening automatically. So there's really not a lot of Flyte code that the user is needing to do this. and yet they get to reap all of the amazing benefits of Flyte as a workflow orchestrator and its rock solid abilities there. So yeah, why Frankenstein the two together? Again, I think it's a neat demo of Flyte's flexibility. I think programmatically leveraging Flyte's workflow orchestration capabilities is a huge plus, no matter what you're doing. So this imperative workflows give you the ability to do that. In our following demo, the tool that I use, I'll talk a little bit about DBT to create and manage task relationships. It actually doesn't give great exposition into the DAG as it runs. You've got some access to it through docs and logs, but you really don't get that like amazing kind of Flyte UI experience when it's running its own DAG. So DBT has a workflow orchestrator built in, but it doesn't have all that awesome stuff that Flyte brings to the table. So again, this is like a best of both worlds. I can do my DAG management in DBT, ship it to Flyte, and have that amazing workflow orchestration happening. So again, I want to talk a little bit about this world I'm in, scale. I need tasks explicitly defined as graphs, and I need tooling to manage the relationships. A quick DAG primer, and I've caveated this because I think everybody in this room already knows what a DAG is, but I made this plot and I am going to use it as much as I can. So a DAG is a directed acyclic graph. It's a way of representing a set of tasks and their dependencies in a graph structure. Each task is represented by a node, and the dependency between the tasks are represented by edges, and it's all directional. There's no loopbacks. And it's a very nice way to organize information that has a directional flow to it. So as you're in Flyte UI looking at your graphs, you're looking at DAGs. And so they're fairly interchangeable. We love DAGs, little callback to the New York logo there. So particularly, in my opinion, by abstracting to tasks and the dependency, the DAG provides a high-level view of the workflow, which makes it way easier to manage and understand these like massive architectures that we end up with inevitably as we're building things. I personally found that abstraction via DAG is a crucial concept when it comes to scaling complex data systems. As you zoom out, what you can see, your granularity has to decrease. You can't look at 1,000 pieces of sand as you stand 9 meters up above the beach. The sand has to clump into rocks. And so something has to abstract somewhere, and DAGs are a great place for that to happen. I'll just move forward a little bit quicker. As you start to introduce DAGs in your project, your DAG gets bigger, and then your DAG starts to split, and you end up with multiple DAGs, and then your DAGs get DAGs, and it's crazy. It's DAG creep. I don't think there's a better word for it yet, but inevitably, large projects become multi-DAG projects. And so having something to help you manage all of those DAGs, the relationships of them, and all of those things, that like DAG of DAGs tooling becomes actually quite critical as well. So, I basically just pitched Flyte to the Flyte team, and I think that's very funny. But there is a reason and there is a point. There's just a ton of overlap between, what Flyte does, what my problem set is, my day-to-day problem set is, and what DBT does. But let me keep going. I assure you, I'm not here to just pitch you Flyte. So, everybody here already knows Flyte, tasks, workflows, Flyte UI, right? Like, I don't have to talk about that. Let's talk about a different tool. I want to talk about DBT, which is data build tool. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but I do realize it is a sort of a niche product. But I think, if anybody's in the analytics space, they've probably heard it by now. It's very popular among analytics engineers and data teams that support analytics groups. What's critical is that DBT does all of this modularity and abstraction, but it does it in a SQL first context. So it's arguably quite easy to use if you know how to use SQL. In DBT, a DBT model is the same as a table output, is the same as a task, is the same as sort of a set of SQL that runs with an output. And then DBT allows you to establish the relationships between these models within the model themselves. So everything's explicitly defined. DBT then parses out this information and builds your DAG. So you get this sort of interesting stuff that looks like in your DBT code, it's actually just Jinja. So the curly brackets, ref, raw customers, DBT then knows to reference that previous model and either insert the table relation, or if it's ephemeral, to insert a CTE, or if XYZ, do this, do that. And so in that way, you can build highly modular SQL. You can establish the relationships between all of the tables, and you can then organize these, like, no more should your teams be doing 1,200 line SQL monolith type stuff. You should be using DBT. You should be modular. You have no excuses. DBT lets you use tasks essentially in a SQL context. And then it gives you this really nice CLI for running portions of the DAG with a powerful selector syntax. And so analytics engineers use this constantly. It's a huge part of their workbench for, fixing tables, backfilling, checking data, all of those things. It's a lot of CLI work. You get automatic docs generation, this really nice DAG Explorer that's built in, but only in the docs context. And more than anything, again, just really hit the point, users manage their SQL models and configs. DBT manages the rest. So it's really, you can build really, really complicated stuff with a fairly reasonable learning curve, and you're only ever touching config files and SQL. So this is essentially, you can get into Python via Jinja if you want to, but you don't need to. And that's really, I think, a big appeal of DBT and how it's growing so fast. Okay, so 10 plus slides, one troll, a dirty video. But where do we start? Where are we? Where's this no code Flyte, the imperative way business? Well, I'll get to it. It's time. All right, the intro is done and the distractions are done. So next I want to talk a little bit about how DBT runs its DAGs, establishes its tasks, how we can leverage that via container tasks to also run the DBT workflows in Flyte by exporting each DBT task to Flyte and then reestablishing that DAG in Flyte. It's a mouthful, but it'll make sense. And then, there it is, imperative workflows to automate and scale the process. So it may seem like, wow, this guy's been talking for a while and he still hasn't shown me an imperative workflow. Spoiler alert, you won't see one until about the second last slide. So you could just get that out of your mind. But we're going to keep going because that's what we got to do to get to the imperative workflows. Before I'm going to go any further, quick shout out to the DBT plugin API as part of the Flyte Kit plugins. There may be some of the contributors here today, I'm not sure. For today, we're going to be using DBT inside of a container via container task. We're not going to be using the DBT API, but this could be re-implemented using that plugin. And if you're interested in that, definitely go ahead and do it. So why did I use a container task then? Because the container paradigm is a great fit as a general example. So it's easily extensible. So if you've got something that builds a DAG and runs it, and it's sort of code that can run in a container, you can like readapt this example to work for that as well. This isn't a DBT specific example, even if I did use DBT for it. So I love container tasks because I love the ability to be running these sort of predefined jobs that are already working well enough in a container, and it's a pretty light lift to bring that into Flyte as opposed to rewriting it all as Flyte code, which I think long-term is the goal for us, but short-term, I really like using the container tasks personally. So here's our setup. We need a DB. We're going to use a Postgres container. Docker, I'm running this all locally. I was going to do a local demo, and then I decided, nah, it's not worth it. So here we are. This is me simulating a local demo. We've got the Docker container running locally, and the only thing I need to do is Docker network inspect bridge to get its IP address if I want to do Docker to Docker communication, which I'm going to want to do because my Flyte CTL is running in a container, my DBT is going to be running in a container, and my Postgres is going to be running in a container. So I need to know that bridge address to connect them. I'm just using default bridge in Docker, so that's why this works, but I could set up a custom bridge and do a bunch of other stuff, but there's no need. Since thankfully the Flyte demo respects the default bridge, so I can just do this. As a side note, there is a Postgres container running as part of the Flyte demo, and you can use that as your DBT database if you really wanted to, but I didn't do that because I'm trying to be a good citizen, but just a fun aside if you like to hack stuff. So we've got our DBT set up, we've got the container set up. Setting up the connection profiles in DBT is super simple. I've got two profiles. I've got one to handle the container to container context. And then I've just got this second one here to handle for some local testing. And so DBT comes with this lovely debug command, which will run a bunch of tests. And so I can do the DBT debug on my local profile using localhost. It's connecting to the container. Everything's great. I also, skip ahead a few slides, built a container that has the DBT on it, and I can also DBT run that container. I can run the debug, and I'm not passing a profiles argument to it now. So it's going to use the default profile, which I've set up elsewhere as JaffleShop, and so that uses the container address. That all works too. So lovely stuff. Not too bad so far. We've got our DB in a container, and we can connect to it as we need. So let's get a DBT project. JaffleShop is the canonical example project in DBT. If you've ever heard of JaffleShop, it's a DBT thing. One day, hopefully, we'll design a JaffleShop logo and sell t-shirts with JaffleShops on them, but today is not that day. So go get yourself a JaffleShop project, just simple git clone. And so my project right now just looks like this. I've got DBT Flyte demo, I've got JaffleShop inside of it. And it comes with a few different models. Here's the JaffleShop DAG as it comes from the DBT doc. So DBT doc serve and web browser will pop up, and here's me showing what that DAG looks like. So we've got essentially raw data transformed into staging data, which is sort of analytics engineering and DBT data construct, into the reporting layer, which would then go out to your stakeholders. Each one of these would be a model file, and then DBT is managing those relationships and managing the running. Okay, so little detour. Let's talk about from DAG to container. So the DBT DAG is always going to build this internal DAG of the project, and then use that internal DAG to run each model task based on the run command. It knows the SQL it needs to run, it knows the relationship between the models, and so that it knows the order to do it in, and so then it goes ahead and does that whenever you do DBT run. So there's a little bit extra though. So given a simple DAG, I'm just doing A, Model B, Model C, one line, as simple as possible. DBT also offers this selection syntax. So here I'm saying DBT run select A and all of its downstreams. So that's going to give me ABC. And that's actually equivalent to running DBT run select A, DBT run select B, DBT run select C. Same example. So for DBT run select B and all of its upstreams and all of its downstreams. So this is a manufactured example, but life goes on. Again, that's going to give me model A, B, and C, and that can be broken out into its component commands as well. And so finally, the one other. Imagine we say C and its B and its downstreams. That will be B and C. Then that's two model run commands. The reason I want to sort of break this out is because what ends up happening a lot for DBT users is they'll use the select command to chop up, you can imagine a DAG of 1,000 different things, and to chop it up into different sections and run those different sections on different schedules or coordinate different things. You can do DBT run, but if you've got 500 tables it's going to write, you probably don't want to do that. You want to think about organizing it. And so what a lot of teams do is DBT supports tagging models. So you add all of the models as part of a workflow with a tag, and then you do DBT run select tag my workflow. And in that way, that's how you start to define, workflows in this DBT context, and you can run that with the CLI. So that hopefully kind of gives you a view on how you would have this sort of comparison of what a workflow looks like in DBT and how you can select the models which correspond to your workflow and so on and so forth. So in our JaffleShop DAG, we've got the full DAG here. And so example run, select orders and all of its children. And so that ends up being sort of the top half. And then here select staging customers and its children and parents. And so there's different ways I could have set this up. I just wanted to be kind of show a few different examples. And so the idea here is this in a production environment, maybe for different reasons, the data lands at different times and you want to run these different processes at different times or whatever. For whatever reason, you don't want to run it as a full DAG, you want to run it as two different workflows. This is how that would look, but again, scaled up to hundreds and hundreds of workflows across 1,000 endpoints. So if you can imagine, we've got this DBT container. Given a simple DAG, instead of doing dbt run, we do Docker run my project, and then again, dbt run select A, which then converts out to, the component. You can convert that back out to the component Docker run tasks. And so if you're familiar with container tasks, you probably already know where I'm going with this. If you can split out a dbt task into its component run commands, and you can put dbt into a container, why not wrap up those run commands in a container task and then tell Flyte what the relationship is between them, and let Flyte run dbt, where dbt is still doing all of its like database management and all that wonderful stuff, rendering the queries. But Flyte's going to then run each task, which is again each model or each database modification in the order that the DAG specifies. For this example, I'm just building a super simple dbt container. dbt publishes containers. You can go grab that super easy. I'm just adding in my dbt Postgres so that I can connect to my Postgres container. Here I'm adding in Jaffle Shop, which is my dbt project, into the work dir, which is where the dbt is going to default. The container is going to default when it runs. So I've basically already previewed this. We've got a DAG, ABC. It's going to run 3 different, Docker commands. Well, I can move those into Docker. I can move those into Flyte container tasks. I've got my run commands, and then from there in Flyte, as part of a workflow, I can then set up the ordering so that the DAG actually shows up as a DAG and not just a bucket of tasks without any sort of relationship. So to do this, I've already got an article up which talks about doing the DAG extraction from dbt, which is its own, talk. I'm not going to do it because this isn't a dbt room. But suffice to say, in this example, we've already got a DAG extracted. But you could imagine if you've got some other software paradigm that is also establishing your tasks and the code to run inside. That again really just has to land into some organized execution plan, which then we can input into the second half of this, which is creating it all in Flyte. So I was thinking about like, oh, what's another like kind of like no code paradigm, and I started to think about like, imagine you had like a flow chart and you just wrote your Python code in the flow chart and then converted that into a JSON and then pushed that to Flyte. And I was like, that's a cool example. I don't think it's that practical, but still, the sky's the limit for this kind of stuff in terms of like how much you abstract and simplify for the user, as long as you've got, the type of paradigm that's compatible with like it goes in a container, accepts a command, and it has a DAG. So here it is, the Magnus Opus. So DAG comes in, each task is registered as a container task. So that's super simple. You load up container tasks from Flyte. We're only using a few of the parameters there, but you can get a lot more complicated than this. And we're sort of pre-prompting the command. I've been doing a lot of ChatGPT lately, so everything's a prompt in my mind now. So we pre-prompt the command with what we know is going to be the dbt run select command. And then we already know what model needs to be run as part of each command from the DAG. How you like manage that relationship between your DAG extract and your container creation is obviously up to you. I was just doing the simplest way I could. So then we're going to go through our 3 tasks. Just some extra preamble about generating task IDs and whatever. It doesn't matter so much. What's key is we're going to build a Flyte task, a Flyte container task. And we're going to do a little bit of organization to make sure that we have the Flyte task object, we know what its parents are, and then just a task ID, which we'll use later. So basically, we're just kind of building up a list of tasks. It's not a workflow yet. Here it is, imperative workflows, da, 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 da. So with the imperative workflow, what's so great about it is we can essentially programmatically create, I've got this workflow, which is my imperative workflow. And then here I'm programmatically associating each task to that workflow. So for each of my tasks, add the entity this task. And then I'm going to use the task ID a little bit later to then, this is programmatically associating all those relationships. So this is doing that like R-shift operator, because I'm not using any inputs or outputs on this, because I don't need to. I mean, you could design something slightly more complicated and do those things, but I didn't. And so then this is sort of that programmatic way. So everybody here is familiar with setting up, task decorator, task decorator, task decorator, workflow decorator, and then task, 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 and then, maybe a launch plan. And so this here is the extent of our Flyte code. It's going to just do it all based on whatever our task is defined as JSON. So suddenly nobody's writing any Flyte code at all. This is just going to happen. So as a single example, I build up my container. I push it to the, so Flyte, I'm missing a slide. I've got Flyte CTL demo running already. Flyte CTL sandbox doesn't work with the container tasks locally, unfortunately, but demo does. So thank you to the Flyte team for helping me with that. So there's a local Docker, what's that called? Repo, I guess. Yeah, registry. There's a local registry as part of the Flyte CTL demo, which is so cool. So you can push your containers to that locally and pull them in your Flyte tasks. And then I'm just going to run this workflow, which I defined in the previous one. I only defined one workflow, one imperative workflow, so it'll run. So I have my dbt DAG, which then now exists in Flyte, and I can run that. All right, scale, that's what I promised, right? That's what it's all about. So you can extend all of this to be something slightly more automated. So in this example, and the example that I'll share at the end, I've just set up a simple YAML file, which is telling, I want to do these 3 workflows. Here's the command. Here's the dbt command that is the selection syntax for those workflows. And then just a couple extra housekeeping config things. dbt helper runs, loads that up, extracts the DAG, writes the DAG import JSON. Flyte helper boots up, loads up the DAG import JSON, registers all the workflows, and that's it. We also have a Docker build and push. So this is how this looks like in CI/CD. You can imagine automated steps as you build your project, which is how we have been setting this up on our production service to play around with. And so what happens is, dbt helper and DAG, dbt helper and Flyte helper, you can pack those into a Python module. And as long as that's getting imported as part of your Python, you just have to make sure, import, Flyte helper, run Flyte helper. That's 2 lines of code that a user needs to have in their Flyte project in order to have this full suite of task registration and DAG export, which is pretty cool. It's abstract, abstract, abstract to the point where now we can set up dbt. This is the ultimate goal of this is you can set up a dbt project and it just looks like a dbt project. And there's one extra file that you never, ever, ever, ever touch, which is just the Flyte caller. And then in CI/CD, the Flyte registration is happening all automatically off that Flyte caller. You update your Docker image and you're done. So here it is. Here's our 2 workflows showing up in remote. And here's sort of what that looks like when that Flyte helper is running and registering. It's just doing sort of its, okay, got demo 1, got demo 2, here's my tasks. Now I'm setting up the relationships and, shipping out all that information. So, okay, that's the main bit. Couple of caveats so that you don't all go home and try and do this. I didn't cover sharing tasks across workflows. There are solutions to that, and I will talk about that in a future article. But in dbt, it's not uncommon to have maybe the same model be recycled by multiple tags. That's an issue. In dbt land, you kind of just end up running the model twice. But in Flyte, we can use caching and we can say, hey, this already ran for this set of parameter inputs, which I also didn't get into, and recycle. And so essentially don't rerun it. Trust that the data is already there. So there's some pretty cool implications there. This demo does not work on Flyte 1.5. I'm running on 1.3.2. I don't know about 1.4. So I'll follow that up and create an issue and hopefully get that drilled out. And then this demo where I pretend that I can do multiple registrations against one imperative workflow actually doesn't work in the Flyte CTL demo locally. It just kind of crashes it, but it does work on the production Flyte server when we run the registration there. So something to untangle. Maybe this doesn't need to work on Flyte demo. It's a bit of an edge case, but either way, if you are trying this out. Last point. I was grinding to have a repo ready for everybody to just have the code and take a look at it all as a holistic piece. It is working, but it's still too ugly to share. So give me a little bit of time to clean that up, and I will be sure to share that all out if you're interested in taking a peek at the hood, because it's all there. It's a working demo. It's all containerized. It's lovely stuff. Okay, that's it. With 30 seconds left, is there any questions, complaints, anything I can say?
I have a question. Is it possible, do you think, to contribute this into Flyte plugins, DBT itself, just make it as an alternative way? And we could make this as part of the PyFlyte CLI option itself. Like you could get something like PyFlyte DBT run project. Right.
Yeah, I think all the pieces are there, except critically getting the DAG out of DBT is actually quite difficult. They don't make it easy. So I've got an issue opened on the DBT core side of essentially saying like, listen, I need, like on Spark, you know how you can just go Spark, give me the execution plan. Like I should be able to do that with DBT, and I can. So it would be to introduce that feature. So that's step number one, because you don't want to be maintaining that DBT extraction sort of logic as part of the Flyte core project. So if DBT can do a better job of that, then picking up that like artifact in Flyte and using the Flyte API to then imperative register it up. Yeah, totally. I think it's a pretty exciting place for that API to go in long term.
I think the best way to get that done then is to actually get a bunch of different users. You know, once you have a repo out, share it with them, and then they all can ask DBT. I know a lot of people use DBT, so we're great.
Yeah, and that's, I think, you know, at the end of the day, my goal with like this article and this talk, and sort of, I'm just going to keep kind of yelling about this at people, is that like, you know, DBT is this great front end for so many like low. It's a low code solution. It's definitely not a no code solution, but DBT is like very popular. It's very easy to learn to do very complicated stuff. And then suddenly if DBT becomes like a front end to all of the amazing Flyte ecosystem, like it's such a strong, powerful tool. Like there's so many problems that go away when this starts to work for me. So super excited about like, you know, this type of paradigm moving forward. So again, sorry, I don't have more Flyte code to show you all, but you know, that's sort of the nature of the beast here.
Oh, this is amazing. I was actually thinking of using this to featureize and then train a model like within the same pipe, which is pretty amazing.
Okay, well, I guess we're over, so I'll hand it back.